Marcia. Thank you so much for joining me
Hi,
on Radical
Bhakti.
Futures. You're welcome. We've known each other for many years, of course, and primarily because of all the incredible work that you do. You are the founder of Arab Lit, which was a digital magazine of Arabic literature in translation that started back in 2009, where we quaintly called them blogs. But there has been so much growth, and you've grown exponentially, particularly as a translators collective. And now there's a print magazine which is just prints these beautiful gorgeous issues called the Arab Lit Quarterly, and these are themed issues. And I know that you have also gone into publishing books. All of this work is gaining a lot of acclaim, gaining a lot of currency. It's so important. It's always on syllabi. Arab Lit, most people know about it. And of course, I was ecstatic when you received the 2024 Ottaway Award for the promotion of international literature, which you certainly have done. And I think this came at a really difficult time. We were nearing a year of genocide in Gaza. Many of the writers and translators you work with were living in a state of extreme danger, extreme peril. And also, just in terms of the debates in the West and everywhere else, literature in Arabic was a sort of site or a place for us to look at the ways in which mechanisms of censorship were working, all these cancelings and so on. Also, how institutions operated, from prizes to book fairs to presses. And, in a way, we were all contending with like the power of translation and publishing and storytelling, but also the impotence of it. And you gave a fantastic speech when you accepted your award. And there was a line in there that struck me, and I wanted to invite you to tell me a little bit more. You said that the literature currently in the spotlight in many languages is Palestinian. So I want to ask you what you mean by that. And I'm assuming that you continue to believe this is the case right now as we enter year 2 of this genocide.
Yeah, I do. And I would say that just yesterday, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but one of the judges for the Palestine Book Award told me that the submissions for this year's prize have ballooned, I think tripled in size.
Wow.
So the Palestine Book Award used to be an award that would get, 20s and submissions in the 20s and 30s of books pertaining to Palestine that year, not necessarily written by Palestinians, but dealing in some way with Palestine. And the number of submissions that they've gotten for this year is increased enormously. And then also, I just answered an email maybe 10 minutes ago from a literary festival in Hamburg that was asking, can we read one of the poems you published at our event that's coming up this weekend? So I think there are a number of ways in which Palestinian literature is in the spotlight, both from a solidarity perspective, of a place of people who are outraged, horrified, and grieving genocide, who want to place Palestinian voices at the center rather than speak about what's happening in Gaza. But then also at the same time, of course, with people very interested in what's happening in Gaza and readers wanting to know. There are large publishers and small publishers and medium-sized publishers who are also making a profit off of this interest. People have much like with Arabic literature in the last, say, 30, 40 years, have a kind of particular thing that they're looking for, right? In a couple of cases, it's happened to me where I've been told, oh no, this story doesn't speak to the moment, meaning it is not sort of exactly this kind of talking about famine or bombing or a child under the rubble that they were expecting this literature to address. So I think while Palestinian literature is very central and incredibly, there's some incredible writing that's come out of Gaza in the last year and a half, but also these large capitalist structures are also, and these large media structures also are looking to shrink the literature too into a way that is not just sellable, but sort of palatable and safe, and they can feel, their sort of deeply cowardly souls can feel that there will be no repercussions for publishing it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think generally, at least, in my view, with Palestinian literature, we have operated with a scarcity paradigm in the West. Not enough works not enough works published by Palestinian authors in translation in Western languages. That was always my sense. It feels like largely dominated by, well, I would say Egyptian to some
Sure,
degree.
sure.
I'm almost surprised at what you're saying. Of course, I understand the shrinking of the themes of what Palestinian literature is going to look like. Even if you think about like what gets quoted from the Darwish, and I am also guilty of this, is the ones things about war and the sad stuff, or just the sad stuff essentially. But
Right.
I wanted you to say more about this, the literature of literature from Palestine, from Palestinians, has become this opportunity. Its publication and distribution has become this extractive activity. Are you saying this is something that is truly, uh, this is something you're observing in the last 2 years, year and a half? That is something that there was a moment where it just kind of suddenly became a thing?
Well, okay, so I think Palestinian literature that it has been frozen out of publishing for a long time,
Yeah.
and publishers have been afraid of it, and publishers are still afraid of some genres and types of Palestinian literature. For instance, I was at an event talking to a children's publisher about Palestinian literature, and it was actually a UK publisher, but she told me, oh, we do 70% of our or 80% of our distribution in the US, so I couldn't bring out a
Wow.
Palestinian book. So I think that that there still exist these kind of frozen areas in publishing. Previously, as Edward Said noted, publishers were terrified to publish anything translated from Arabic, and it was oddly post 9/11 when publishers suddenly saw, oh well, also this is an opportunity. But I think that these always are so many things going on at the same time, right? Some
Yeah.
publishers are thinking this is an opportunity. Some publishers are thinking, they just noticed that there is literature translated from Arabic, and they are open to this new thing. But yes, in the last year and a half, many people have rushed to print books, either by Palestinians or about. Many of them also are simply about Palestine, to kind of reach this market interest.
Yeah.
And then many of them also are this kind of narrowed focus of.
How can you tell though? How can we tell? How can I, who is not marinated, especially, and does not speak Arabic, how can I tell when I could probably tell, but I think mostly one can't tell which one is kind of riding this wave and which one is authentically? I mean, yes, history is one way. Has this publisher historically been doing this? But how can we discern?
I guess I ultimately, whatever, if say Simon and Schuster
Yeah.
finds a great project and they put it together in a great beautiful way, and they don't care and they're just making money, the beautiful project still exists. I think
Mhm.
we have to critique it on the level of what are they actually doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, so say this medium-sized publisher or whoever they are just leapt in and sort of started opportunistically publishing Palestinian literature. I mean, I think in many cases you can tell that it's done in a very harried way. It's not necessarily. I think Huda Fakhreddin has spoken of this
Yeah.
numerous times, which is people who are publishing literature that is not of the highest quality are not really interested in Palestinian literature, are not really giving voice to, because if I was going to publish French literature, or if I were going to publish Lithuanian literature, I would be looking for the very, literature that really speaks to something that's fresh, that's interesting, that's beautifully crafted,
Hmm.
original. I would be looking for all of these things. I need to be
Yeah.
looking for those things also when I'm looking for Palestinian literature, not just to plug it into this space. It's not.
Yeah.
It is also a craft with a long history. It's not simply
Hmm.
something to speak to a moment.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It reminds me of something, a line in, Joe Sacco, the cartoonist whose graphic novel Palestine. He has this very funny scene, and or something bad happens because I mean it's Palestine, and somebody is shot or something like that, and then all the photographers, journalists, everyone pops in, and then he has this sardonic line like, "Peace won't pay the rent."
Uh,
I mean, it's very cynical, but it's reminding me a bit of that, but also this idea that war or just any kind of catastrophic crisis always creates this funneling of certain cultural elements. There are jokes about, whether it's like, are we going to get some bad poems and stories, or are we going to get like the food, or how does it, what gets funneled out. So it's reminding
mm.
me of all this stuff. Yeah, you're right. Of course, I
I
think
think
it's
also,
just.
right, also publishers have this notion that a literature, to be authentic, even needs to fit this sort of some basic stereotypes that they have.
Hmm.
I know a number of translators rather, who've gotten pushback from publishers on things like, oh, this woman doesn't seem realistic. She's drinking a beer. Like this Arab woman doesn't seem
Oh.
realistic. She's having casual sex. Like it was okay, whatever, man. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
So, what is the stereotype then in your mind of this mid level extractive activity of publishing Palestinian literature? What is it you're observing is the image that's coming about?
right. Well, I think that they're looking for literature, a literature of the moment that is a kind of a diary focused, journal focused, reportage poetry, reportage
Hmm.
literature, descriptive of what's going on now, rather than being
Yeah.
interested in the depth of craft, or what's happening, or what's really, I mean, there's some incredible literature of the moment that's
Yeah.
happening, but I think as book people,
Yeah.
we need to honor this literature by also being interested in the craft of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, absolutely. What do you think of like the phenomena of anointing like one writer?
Right.
Recently Musa Babutaha, who's a brilliant poet and a genocide survivor, won the Pulitzer Prize, and everyone's excited and happy, and I'm of course happy for him. His achievements should be recognized, but it does have this feeling of elite capture, or it has this feeling of, here are all these mainstream media and platforms now going to launder their image. I mean, they have promoted the opposite thing for years and years. I don't
Right.
know, what do you think of this? How
I mean,
can
I
we?
think, yeah, I mean, I think often, yeah, this sort of boiling down into one writer as an icon, even rather than listening to writing widely,
Mhm.
having a sort of a pin of with a person's name and photograph on it, rather than, yes, and to use that as a kind of, well, yes, we're interested in Palestinian writers. Here is my buddy, this Palestinian writer. I think what's interesting to me is this, that publishers really have come up to me and said, well, the majority of people in Gaza write in English.
Oh
And
my God.
it's true that Mossab writes in English,
Yeah.
but that is not representative of the
Hmm.
majority which is a very rich writing community, right? A very
Sure.
rich, diverse, broad, in some senses, I don't know, fractured is the wrong word, but there's like, different writing groups and cliques and styles, and
Mhm.
it's not one
Yeah.
Gazan style.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pivot more directly to the politics of publishing, in the sense of, thinking about publishing in a sort of activistic sense, how to direct it, how to channel it towards a sort of activism that can be, pro-Palestinian and so on. I know that you're actively involved in the formation of the Publishers for Palestine. Radical Books Collective is also a member, and I know that you're quite instrumental to some of the kind of calls for strike and global days of action that they have announced, as well as boycotts and things like that. How do you feel now we're nearing 2 years of this catastrophe? How is the energy with the Publishers for Palestine? What are some of its successes, and what do you feel needs to recalibrate? I don't know.
Everybody is feeling exhausted. I think
Absolutely.
no one more than people in Gaza. After this very brief moment where we believed in a ceasefire,
Hmm.
to the intensification of famine and bombing and sniping and killing. I think, and the crushing of the student movements, and the sort of all this that's happening globally. I think people are feeling a bit at a loss, right? When we began this when Publishers Palestine began, it basically around October 2023, during Frankfurt Book Fair, when basically Adanish Shibli, the fair wanted to basically distance themselves from Palestinian literature and shut down events and this awards ceremony for Adania's book, Minor Detail.
Yeah.
Out of a complete, sort of deep bear hug for whatever Israel was going to do, as Germany continues to do, without
Yeah.
any red lines in sight.
Ridiculous.
And I think this was this sort of formative moment for Publishers
Yes.
for Palestine, because of a feeling of responsibility around this event, and a revulsion for Frankfurt Book Fair's stances. And I think I don't think you can talk about any kind of success of anything when people continue to die on an hourly, daily basis. But that over the course of these years, it has also pushed us as a group to start thinking more and more about how do we rework our part of publishing, right? Publishing in so many ways is built for those big five, is built around what they need, the largest of the publishing houses.
Yeah.
And built around what does Frankfurt want as this gigantic corporate book fair? What do Sharjah and Abu Dhabi want? What do these big institutions want? What we need to do is pivot away from those, building our own structures. I think it's especially important now, as there is these slashing, not just of NEA funding, but of funding for, government funding for literature. I think we need to expect that this will accelerate, and that we need to think more about how we create structures of relationships, distribution with each other, that work for small and medium-sized publishers, that work for authors and translators,
Mhm.
that different pathways where things don't need to go through, these particular cities, New York, London, Frankfurt, etc., that where we are reimagining publishing models in a very deep way.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I remember all the furor and the grotesque nature, and the way in which they cut down, the whole thing emerged of Adania Shibli's prize being cancelled and all this kind of stuff, the ceremony cancelled, and the formation. And you said something interesting. Of course, I know about the big five, big four, whatever they are. The number keeps
Yeah.
changing, but these,
Right. Big one very soon.
yeah, big one, exactly. So essentially, that Western paradigm, I think more and more people are becoming aware of this intensity, right? That they sort of hog all the circuits of distribution, and so on, and that they dominate. But you also mentioned Abu Dhabi and Sharjah, and just within a sort of global South context or Arabic language context, who are the villains there? Or not villains, but what are the institutional challenges? There are
Yeah,
villains, I'm sure, but
yeah, there are
institutional
villains.
challenges,
Mhm.
what are those their structures that you can kind of educate me about?
Okay, well, yes. So Arabic publishing in many ways has transformed massively in the last 20 years,
Hmm.
pivoting towards these big Emirati festivals
Oh,
and book fairs, which is,
sure.
before, or and also literary prizes, etc. So let's
Mhm.
say before prizes, literary prizes and literary patronage was often nation state based. You would win the a prize from the Egyptian government, but you may not, or you wouldn't. You'd be a writer who was against the state.
Mm,
Whereas now much of that energy has moved to. There's also other big Gulf prizes, and the big book fairs in Saudi Arabia are also massively expanding. There's the
wow.
Qatar Prize in Doha as well. So yeah, there's tremendous. Oman is also starting really ramping up its book fair efforts too. So I
Mhm.
think you're seeing a lot of movement there. And Abu Dhabi in particular has positioned itself similarly in some ways to like Emirates Airlines, that it's as a hub for
Mhm.
Eastern publishers, come to meet Western publishers. So it's not just about Arab publishers, and not but it's also about publishers from India, from
Sure.
Southeast Asia, etc.,
Mhm.
and inviting publishers from around the world. So then, yes, this becomes another. I mean, Abu Dhabi was in a partnership with Frankfurt for its sort of formative
Oh
period.
God. Yeah.
So it is very much on that a
Yeah. So
similar model.
basically, like, we can't rejoice in, having to attend a festival in Oman over London, and that imagine that they have a different slate of writers that they're
Well,
promoting.
Oman, I would give some
Let's meet
elbow
in
space
Oman,
to
fine.
Oman.
But
Yeah.
no, I mean, I'm just saying generally that, while we should be rejoicing in these new structures that are coming out with hopes that they are less interested in just Anglo style, Western style approaches, the truth is that they just end up imitating the same capitalist kind of paradigm. So there's no decentering happening. Is that accurate?
I mean, certainly with some of them, absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
of course, everything is like Sharjah is more decentered and slightly
Hmm.
more organic than the fair in Abu Dhabi, which was created in partnership with Frankfurt. But yes, a lot of these, like the the International Prize for Arabic Fiction, which people often colloquially call the Arabic Booker, was yes also made on the model of the Booker Prize. So, but I think at the bottom is big money, capitalist structures, and it is not a kind of organic space. The same problem that you find in Abu Dhabi as you find in Frankfurt. It's like a gigantic convention center of stands, right? It's
Yeah.
not like the old. Okay, not
It's the
not to be
business of books,
right, not to
basically.
be romantic about any previous, the old Cairo Book Fair, but there were places where writers could go and meet. There was a kind of a more organic feel to some of it. There were places where you could hold a protest. I just cannot imagine, as we all know, we cannot sort of, as a group, imagine a protest occurring inside the Frankfurt Book Fair. It would be like a protest occurring inside Goldman Sachs. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they've tried that with Occupy Wall Street and all. No, I'm kidding. But I know exactly what you mean. I mean, it's like it is this in the end, the goal is to sell books, make deals, that it's doesn't have, and it should be, but it's done in this kind of, it's imitative, in a way. There's a sort of corporatization, the big hall and those stalls and bouncing from one to the other type of thing, the cultural element, the nuance kind of getting lost perhaps, or you have to dig it out in some form.
Right. And I'm certainly in favor of publishers, authors, translators, editors, book designers, etc., everybody along the chain making a
Mhm.
living at what they do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Just, finding a new way to do that, that is not extractive, that is not anti-political, that is not suppressive of people's voices.
yeah. Absolutely. And you kind of offered before, when you was started speaking about Big Five and all that, you offered some sort of decentered model. I know I keep saying decentered, a model to combat this disease, right? This disease of the business logic of books and publishing, and something about strengthening smaller to medium sized presses or something like that. Can you say a little
Yeah,
more?
I think we need to focus on what are the needs of small and medium-sized presses. We need to this needs to be the center of how we imagine these new distribution networks, where we work together rather than we try and fit ourselves into the model of the giants. And and yes, so rather than a gigantic Frankfurt, what other kinds of models can we imagine? A Litoral festival in Madrid, but I also think, we have to imagine all kinds of decentered models that happen around the world.
Yeah.
Some that happen online, some that happen in other ways that don't rely so much on plane travel, I'm afraid to say, and that are more accessible to smaller publishers
Hmm.
who necessarily afford to stick a lot of staff on a plane and send them around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Coming back to what's happening in Gaza, in Palestine. How do you think the mission of Arab Lit has changed? How have you all adapted to this situation? I know you're publishing lots of writers from Gaza. I know you published, the Majala 28, you gathered those folks, and Gaza was published, and then there have been chapbooks. I think the grief issue that just came out, congratulations, it's stunning as always, um, is also focusing quite a bit on Gaza, on Palestine. So, how have you all changed? How are you all moving with this?
Right. Well, I think we're different people. I mean, I think it has changed us fundamentally, and our relationship to the world, and how we see how our relationship to the world can be. And
Hmm.
so we're just trying to find new ways to talk to each other, I think, new models. Abdurrahman Agindi, for instance. So we came up with this idea for having a grief issue because, as a global movement, the idea that our griefs help us create these new connections
Yeah.
as well, and that grief is not sort of to be alone and sad, but to be together and
Mhm.
to propel ourselves forward. And Abdurrahman Agindi came up with this notion of inviting people to write letters, and that we would share many more of them
Mhm.
online, and that this, to spark also people to continue to think about
Mhm.
how this grief can be productive. I don't, we focused, of course, not just on Gaza, but also listening to Gaza, and how can Gaza also transform how we think about working with writers in Sudan and elsewhere and around the world, and how do we sort of change these
Yeah.
modes to.
Yeah.
We're also running a, a translation workshop based
Mhm.
around some conversations that we had with with translators, emerging translators in Gaza. We're running a translation workshop in June, 8 sessions with some of the leading Arabic and English translators in the world. And I was just talking with Batul Abouaklin, who's our Gaza coordinator for this, and is a fantastic poet who has a
Yeah.
collection coming out next month.
Amazing.
And she was talking about how this, they're looking to create a community of literary through this, because so much also people in Gaza have been atomized in the last, she's been
Sure.
studying for her degree. She's a university student, by herself on her phone, with very little, contact. It's like COVID, but times 10, because of, there's not really even much connection with the professors. You get an assignment, submit an assignment. And so this, community building event, which is how we're hoping that it occurs, to build community within Gaza, and then connections between these translators and translators who can be mentors on an ongoing basis around the world.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like a much huger answer than I imagined. Like, to think about these projects, these themed issues, or even the online stuff that, so every day, there's a poem, there's something you're publishing as a way to kind of bring people together to the extent that you can. I think that's really beautiful. I mean, I'm going to ask you, and I it comes from a place outside of the social media annoyances that this question falls under, which is, what about Sudan, right? And I don't think it's exactly the same. I don't think the two places are so parallel, but they are both in a state of extraordinary crisis and suffering and violence, and and the genocide word is also used for Sudan. And I don't know. And then, of course, there is Arabic literature. I know you publish a lot of that. Is there? What are you? How do you conceive of that? How are you thinking of that? I'm not. I'm not challenging you. I just want to hear.
No, I'm happy to be pushed to, I mean, certainly, I think it has been harder to maintain contact
Mhm.
with writers inside Sudan who are
Yeah,
still there, rather than, of course, we're publishing many Sudanese writers and artists who are
sure.
outside of Sudan,
Hmm.
than in Gaza, because, you know, there they are, fenced in,
I
entrapped in
know.
Gaza. They may not be in the same block that they were last time. The tent may be in a new location, but there they are. Whereas, in Sudan, people have.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so much huger. It's a very different scale and geography, the way that pans out.
But I
Um,
do think that we can sort of learn some of this, that the restructuring of how we deal with things, and the changes that we need to make to literary pathways
mhm.
matter to both contexts.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, I know. Just because when you said that, I thought, you know, that would be interesting if we think about it within a context of Sudan community building and solidarity and all that stuff. And I think all that is probably happening. Maybe I don't know enough, or but yeah, it's very, very interesting what you say. But I think it's also different. Yeah, I'm just wary of that kind of thing, because Sudanese person will never say, like, you're not paying attention to me, you're only paying attention to Palestine. But it is a sort of low hum,
Mm, mm, mm.
sometimes. So yeah, so I didn't want it to kind of fall within that low hum, because it's not coming out of that. Talking of social media, which has been, it's like hard nowadays to criticize social media, because it's the only place to know what's going on, because every other media is just a sort of colossal failure. And I know that in the last 2 years, so much has been circulating, and literary stuff, essays, quotations, this, that, and the other. And I just want to ask you, in your experience as an editor translator, um, what do you think is the most impactful genre? There's a sort of a general addiction to Mahmoud Darwish quotes, right? Those are like,
Mm.
and they're always awesome, and they're beautiful, and they really, like, every time there's something that's good, they, you know uh, you feel something, and they do something, they explain something. So, and that suddenly makes poetry very more valid than it would be, in the sense of, like, if you publish a volume of poetry, how far will it travel, and so on. Do you think war, genocide, catastrophes change uh, what genres we consume? And in the past couple of years, what do you think has been an impactful genre? That's
I don't think I don't think war necessarily changes what genre we consume, but I do think, technology and the
sure.
kind of platforms that we get it on do. I mean,
Yeah.
you have the rise of the Instagram poets because you have Instagram.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
eh, but I mean, when you talk about impactful, I guess I don't even really know how to quantify it. I would still think that you
That's
do
like
that
moving
you do.
more, that's being read more, or something in your
Well,
gut
yes,
feeling.
but okay, right, but uh, certainly individual poems extracted from a collection, extracted from their context,
Hmm.
circulating on social media on a kind of an Instagram-sized image, are glazing more eyeballs. I do think that you need the full book by Mahmoud Darwish,
Yeah.
I do, in order to really be transformed, to have
Mhm.
your world transformed. I do think that you really need the
Why?
whole
We're in
context. Okay.
2025, Marcia. Why not? It's a different
Why not?
world. Why? Forget
I'm
the
not,
full text.
forget the full text.
I'm kidding.
Why? I just think that it's necessary. I'm not saying it will always happen.
Hmm.
Uh, I just think, yes, you can be moved, certainly, by uh, a poem pulled from. I'm moved all the time by a poem that I see, a painting that I see. But I think, being moved is different from being transformed,
Sure. And altered, even.
altered. See, having
Forever.
your worldview changed by something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, you've said it in many different ways, but maybe I'm asking you to synthesize more. What can publishers do? What can editors do as this thing just keeps going and going and going? What do you feel? I know there are many things, so maybe is not a clear answer, but what urgently do you believe, if you are an editor, you are a publisher, what should we be doing?
I, Honestly, I'm going to say from the beginning that I don't know. I would like to go somehow hurl my
Hmm.
body over, so that nothing can happen to my dear Batul, or
Yeah.
or Allah, or any of our writers, or anybody they know, their enemies, the guy they hate down the street, anybody. Um, so to begin with,
Hmm.
I don't know, but I think
Yeah.
we for from the first, we need to stop being afraid uh, of what we are actually committed to.
Hmm.
Um, if we're going to do something, we need to fully commit to it, to do it all the way, to really engage, to not pull back and say, "Oh well, some people say it's a genocide," or
Oh
really
God.
need there completely. And I do think that creating new structures and creating new ways that we do business, creating new ways to distribute, share, talk about, new modes of literary criticism. I think these, decolonial or abolitionist, or however we want to construct these
Yeah.
new kinds of meaning, anti-capitalist, or however we want to imagine it, we need these new ways that we're talking about Palestinian literature, not these kind of old extractive, profit-seeking, iconizing, boiling down ways of it.
Yeah.
I think it involves making partnerships. It involves changing the way that we do business.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I had told you before that I was thinking this like, but when I was thinking like, as this crisis unfolds, this is a very silly small word, but it feels like culture activism feels useless, like literature is useless. There was somebody, I think it was Mariam Barghouti, who's like, stop writing poetry and stop sharing poetry, go block a bridge or something, and uh and it's like, it's true. Can literature change you know material conditions as they unfold? We call this culture work, culture activism. I've also been involved in wanting to do like a day, read for Rafat, or read Palestine week, all these kinds of things to spread awareness, this, that. But some days I just think all of this is absolutely useless. So I just want you to tell me. You can join me there. You can join me in my pit of despair, or you can tell me, don't think like that, and tell me why.
Okay. Well, I would say, first of all, I would never tell somebody inside Gaza, don't write a poem. I think for some people it
For
is
sure.
the only space in which, I mean, this is what I'm not to speak for somebody else, but people have said it's the only space in which they have control and they can shape their world and shape meaning. But as they shape the world and shape meaning, I mean, I think that is what we ask literature to do. So I think sometimes when we say that literature doesn't make a difference, we're thinking of literature in that singular sense. Nothing I write, Marcia Lynx Qualey, is going to make a difference. Yeah, sure. But the way in which words are used, the way in which discourse is shaped, the way in which we shape it together, the way in which we do literature together, I think that does have a transformative power. So because we've become so alienate, into this sort of single author culture, of a big name, a book, I am successful as me for what I've written. I think that we lose that. We lose the transformative power, because the transformative power is not in a single person. It is in these big movements of linguistic movements, language movements, shared movements. So I think literature matters, but not in this way of like me, of what I write personally.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I think part of what I'm saying comes out of also knowing that, for example, the word genocide, right? It's was in a way validated, given to us by legal structures when the South African team presented their case at the ICJ, or certain countering certain narratives happens also within a journalistic space or something like that. So I'm also coming out of feeling like literary, poetic language, which I firmly believe over time changes something in a moment of deep crisis, um, perhaps feels useless. But I think it's about chipping away, maybe you're saying.
It's about slowly moving things and reimagining connections and reimagining our world together in conversation over a period of time. And yes, as Mariam says, if you can block a bridge, block a bridge. But you could
Absolutely.
also write a poem as you're blocking the bridge,
Totally.
You could do
Absolutely. Or
both.
write a poem about blocking that bridge. But okay. Thank you so much, Marcia. I will end on this note. That was really illuminating, really important stuff. Thanks.
Thank you, Bhakti.